All right. Well, good evening once again. Thank you for joining Tropical Audubon Society and the Cape Florida Banding Station for our webinar, Behind the Scenes at the Cape Florida Banding Station, 20 Years of Community Science. Before we get started, I'm going to just go over a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'll introduce our panelists, and then we'll get started. All attendees on this webinar are in listen-only mode. Please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to pose questions to the presenter. We're going to do the questions at the end, and a recording of the webinar will be made available online in sometime in the next few days, and we'll also be sending out an email with the recording. So now let me introduce our panelists for the evening. Michelle Davis is the co-founder and director of the Cape Florida Banding Station. She joined Tropical Audubon in 2020 as a conservation colleague. She helped establish the station in 2002 to monitor fall songbird migration on Key Biscayne. Michelle grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and has been passionate about birds from a very early age. She received a BA in art and scientific illustration from the University of California, Santa Cruz in 1990, and later studied at Florida International University, where she received a professional science master's in environmental policy and management in 2018. Her love of birds led to a decade of seasonal fieldwork across the Southeast, Southwest, and Northern Gulf of Mexico, focusing primarily on migratory songbirds. She moved to the Miami area in 2000 to work in Everglades National Park with the endangered Cape Sable seaside sparrow as the subject of her research. Brian Raposa is going to be our moderator this evening. He is a Tropical Audubon Society board member, and he is our field trip coordinator. Until his retirement in 2018, he was an environmental science teacher, outreach specialist, and internship coordinator at Mast Academy Maritime and Science Technology High School in Miami. He has served as the Tropical Audubon Society field trip coordinator since joining Task Board in 2001. In this role, he leads birding field trips throughout Florida, the US, and the neotropics. He's also the author of Birding Florida, a bird finding guide to more than 200 locations throughout the state. Since 2001, he's also served as the Christmas bird count compiler for both Miami and Coop Bay, Everglades National Park. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Tropical Audubon and the Cape Florida Banding Station this evening. And we're going to get started with Michelle.
All right, well, as Anna already said, I'm going to give a quick rundown. Thank you for coming tonight. And I'm going to give, most of the night I'm going to be talking about the people and the birds behind the scenes over to, for 20 years of banding. And I'm going to give a quick overview about what we do in the first place in case you're not familiar with it. Our location is at Bill Baggs Cape Florida State Park, which is the very tip of Key Biscayne. As you can see, it's one of the few patches of green in what's mostly an urban area, so it attracts a lot of migrating birds. And I decided to put the banding station there because of the location. And the banding process for migratory birds is we set up an array of nets. These nets are delicate, very nearly invisible, and the birds flying through the forest don't see them and they get caught. And our trained volunteers take the birds out very gently from the nets, and then they get put in bags. They get brought back to the central banding tent. Each bird, one bird per bag, and they're calm while they wait to be banded. And the banding process, the biggest thing is if each bird gets an individually numbered band issued by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and that means that bird can be tracked for the rest of its life. I get the bands from the government. I submit my data to the database so that anybody who catches my bird anywhere can report it, and that's how we know where they end up. We've had birds reported that are like from as far away as Maritime Canada and Puerto Rico, and some that are like 8, 9 years old. And the next thing we do when we have the bird in the hand is we identify it to species, age, and sex. And we mostly use the plumage to do that. Some birds use sex by wing cord, but it's mostly the plumage. Lots of little details, molt limits, and younger birds have different feathers than older birds in a lot of species. We take its weight, and we also check its condition of its flight muscle and its fat, because that's the flight muscles are the engine and the fat is the fuel. So one of the big things we find out here is, are the birds that land at Cape Florida, are they able to continue their migration? Do they have enough fat, enough muscle to keep going? And if they don't, if they need to replenish fat, are they able to at Cape Florida? And then when we're done, we let the bird go. And the process takes a couple of minutes per bird. And so I got really into, as Anna said, I was really into migration in the 90s, working on the Gulf Coast for Dr. Frank Moore, he's one of the pioneers of studying migration ecology. And I came down here and I wanted to put a banding station there. Nobody was doing a long-term banding station in South Florida. And it just, I got the permits together, and it was just basically me by myself with a couple people like Robin Diaz who were interested in what I was doing. And Liz Golden, the park biologist at Bill Baggs Cape Florida State Park. Robin and Liz were integral to getting the banding station going, and we're there year after year after year. I still work with Liz, and Robin worked with us up until when she moved away. And so now 20 years has passed. We've had over the years probably about 100 volunteers, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a very intense volunteer commitment, and you learn how to, you're doing science. I mean, the data we collect can be used by researchers to for whatever questions they're asking about migratory bird. We share our data, and it's a really good pathway too for some young people that are wanting careers in conservation, because they can come and volunteer and they get that foot in the door and they learn mist netting, extracting the birds, and then learning how to band them is a really valuable skill for people that are interested in conservation. So we've had 20 years. The time is, well, both flown by and feels like forever. And we've had probably 100 volunteers go through the door or a flap of the banding tent. And we banded over 40,000 birds at this point. So we started, this is the very first week we started in October 2002. It took me a while, it took us a while to get going because I was waiting on my final permit. I've got like 3 sets of permits, federal, state, and park. And when we got going, it was already October, and I had a tarp just propped up with an extra pole and a camp chair and 10 nets. And these are friends of mine from the Everglades, volunteers, just helped me out the first few days. And then we upgraded by the second year, 2003, we actually started in August and had our first full season. And by then, the tent was probably donated by Robin Diaz. So that was a nice step up. And it's nice to have a tent in case it rains or in case there's an iguana in the tree over you that decides to release waste. You want a tent, also for the shade. And then we upgraded to a wood floor for our tent, and that's when we hit the big time. And this is us. We've got Liz engineered the floor in probably 2010 or so, and then it wore out after a while, so we replaced it last year. And now we've got a house. So these are the guys, 2 of the guys that were there the very first week, Florian Vu and Marcos Gomez. They were the Everglades volunteers that helped me a lot. And also I have pictures of them later with David LaPuma, a local hero who's now off in Cape May. He was pretty instrumental in the very early days of this too. And then there's Elizabeth Golden, Robin Diaz, who are kind of just, it's Elizabeth holding a sterling warbler that matches her outfit. This is Robin with the bird I will mention later. And this is us lounging around in 2004, 2005. And my goodness, we all look a lot younger than now. Oh. And this was Hurricane Wilma on October 24, 2005, kind of trashed the place. This is our banding tent, which actually we left up. We took our gear and packed it away, but we left the tent up, and it actually survived 117-mile-an-hour wind gusts that were recorded on Virginia Key, and all the palm trees falling all around it. And we got back the next day, had a mess to clean up. And we actually had, after Wilma, we had our nets open within, I think, close to 24 hours from when the storm had passed, because it was passed in the morning, and the very next day we were banding, and lots of catbirds, and birds are just kind of, whoa, what just happened? But the hurricane ended up, we caught a lot of birds for like the next 3 years after Wilma, because she destroyed the canopy, and then there was a lot of understory growth, and that just made the birds were traveling lower at the level of our nets, because right now the canopy is a lot higher than our nets. In 2013, another milestone in the banding station was our first cooperation with Tropical Audubon. And we had 3 different volunteer, before we kind of had a small kind of skeleton crew of like 3 or 4 hardcore volunteers who were there all the time. But then we took in volunteers, we advertised it, and we had like, it must have been like 15 people on 3 different days. And a lot of our long-term volunteers that we have now came out of this volunteer drive, August of 2013. During one of them, this huge thunderstorm broke over us, where it was blowing like 40 miles an hour, and we were all trying to jam in the tent. I think that's a record for the most amount of people in the banding tent at any one time. Oh. And here's some more characters. There's David LaPuma that I mentioned before, and Paul Bithorn, a little cameo of a classic Miami birder, rest in peace. David Shafter volunteered with us for a long time. And Eliana Ardila, I think she came from that 2013 group too. She and Mark, that are now on the task board, were very integral part. We got a lot of really solid volunteers out of that group. And I still talk to David LaPuma. He ended up being director at Cape May for a while. And I just sent him a sticker today, or last week. Here's some more faces. We got Mark, Miriam. I think a lot of you know Miriam. Jim King is in the background. That's on the right is David Foster. He was one of, the banding station has outlasted. I think there's been 4 or 5 park managers since we've been there. And David Foster was always very supportive of us. He liked to come out and see what we're doing. And then the young woman and the child, this is Robin Diaz's daughter. This is Mishi and Michael, the son, her grandson. They came out to visit. I think 2 out of 3 of her kids have visited over the years. And here's more pictures with Jim King. He passed in 2017. It was a loss too. He's just was a great naturalist. It was great working with people and other volunteers. We just have a really good set of people year after year after year. Just, I love watching how everybody works together. This is Miriam Elizabeth Lago. Luis Gless a few years back. Mike Diaz, that's Rangel Diaz's brother. Got a bunch of people that have their Hawkwash shirts up in the right corner. There's Rangel, Rafael Galvez, who everybody probably knows. Mario, the Porcelli family was also a big part of the band, or they still are a big part of our volunteer. Their 2 sons, Nico and Lucas, pretty much grew up at the banding station and became, very good extractors, and just watching them grow and develop was really cool. And they know their birds really, really well. Then we had Martina Hilbrand from Austria. She was a grad student. She worked with us for a while, and we did spring and fall while she was here. It was interesting. It was fun working with her and getting kind of European ringing perspective. It's always good to kind of have a breath of fresh air of especially I like when other scientists use our site for a while. It's been a while since we've had that happen. We're hoping that we can promote that in the future, because I really like the cross fertilization of different people, different ways of doing things and ideas that get exchanged. Oops. And we get goofy out there because we have a good time. You know, everybody's out there. Very few of us are getting paid. So it's a labor of love, but a lot of people get hooked on the banning. This is a slow day. So we're just goofing. With David Schaefer again, he volunteered for a long time. Irene was one of my Sparrow, she actually was paid. She worked with me on the Sparrow project as a seasonal, and she hung around to, even though I couldn't pay her to work at the banding station, she hung around for the fall to get the experience with all the different kinds of warblers and to get banding experience on her resume. Oops. And here's my favorite expression of all in 20 years is what's happening is Elsa is holding a red-shouldered hawk and releasing it by kind of tossing it up. And as it flies by Jen Sweatman, she just made this expression, which is her O face, I guess. And here's more faces. Celeste, I think people have been at task for a while. Remember Celeste? And this is Ted and Barbara Center. They were longtime volunteers. They don't volunteer as much anymore. They're doing a lot of traveling, enjoying themselves, but they are integral. And Miriam and Mario again, who are still here, still a huge part of what the banding station is. And this is Lucas, the son, the Porcelli, one of the younger of the Porcelli sons, who that Cardinal and Lucas were both born in 2005. And so in that picture, they're 10. The Cardinal lived to be 12, and then we haven't seen it since. But it's kind of cool to think that they're the same age. And then we're fussing around in our new fun Cape Florida cool t-shirts. And then this down on the bottom, this is Miriam and Celeste again. They're showing, we had, with Raphael, we made a nice banner of our first 10 years of data that we were paying at the bird day we would have at TAS back in, I think it was usually in February, back before COVID. So we were all excited about the new banner. And it could work on a game show, ta-da. Oh, and here's a little bit later, 2017, Dan O'Malley, he was Florida Fish and Wildlife loaned him to us. He actually got to use a work day one day a week coming and banding for us. And he was already an experienced bander, so he was good to fill in when me or Liz couldn't be there. And he was a great help. And then here's Donna Malfetto. She has a new name. She's married, a doctor. She's going to be at this Raptor conference coming up. But she came out to the banding station a lot over the years while she was working on her degree. And then Abigail was another one of my Sparrow project field techs who stayed on for the fall just to get that extra hands-on experience with birds and learn all the different species. And of course, like everybody else in the world, we had COVID in 2020. So everybody put on their masks and we did pretty much the best that we could. And actually we did all right that year. Nobody caught it during the field season. We had kind of rigorous protocols where we tried to be spread out and wearing masks outside. We were gathered for those pictures, but the rest of the time, four of those as a family, they all lived together anyways. But we made it work that year. Actually, I was working other jobs, but there was a lot of really experienced field people around, like Brian Camerano, this gentleman up here with the Chuck Will's widow, David Tafoya and Kristen Brush. They also were Sparrow Project people hanging around in the fall. And let's see, let's see, Mark Kramer there, and then Alex Sharp. A lot of these people, they, you know, there weren't a whole lot of field jobs going on during COVID, so they volunteered to keep the station running when I was only available to band 2 days a week because I had a full-time desk job. So these guys were able to just jump in and keep their field skills up while waiting the pandemic out, and it ended up working in our favor. And here's some of our newer people, 2021, and also Naseem Mahamar just got sub permitted, so now they're we went in just a few years through the whole process of learning how to extract birds and learning how to ban them, age them, and sex them. So now Naseem is on my permit as a official sub permitting, so that means they can ban in my absence. And Rebecca Wood is also might get to that point. She started after Naseem, and so these are two of the newer. Also, I'm going to probably be working with Rebecca. She works also at Biscayne Nature Center, so I'll probably be working with her on that project, banding down there when that gets rolling. So it's just cool to watch these folks just, you know, come in and learn and work well together, and they make friends with each other and advance if they're interested. And Naseem is very, you know, they were very, very keen to learn everything. So, and some people are happy with being extractors. They're like, they're like, I'm happy, this is good. And then others want to, you know, learn as much as they can about the banding part. Let's see. A couple more pictures. There's Cynthia again with the adult broadwing hawk. And then Bob Warren on the right is our oldest volunteer. He's 81 years old, I think, 80 or 81, and he runs circles around us younger people. We've had volunteers from 8 years old to 81. We're not just saying that, it's actually reality out there. So it's been it's a fun, diverse crew of people. And it's amazing the people that I've met doing this over the last 20 years. I get all caught up in just that daily, oh my God, do we have enough people on the schedule, this, that, and the other, and then I have to step back and be like, look at this, look at all these people that are here helping with this, and it amazes me, and I'm grateful, and I love you guys, man. And Joe Barros, the president of Tropical Audubon, when he has the time, has been volunteering also. And Stephanie Munguia is also, she graduated really fast to sub permittee. She also can ban in my absence. She had a little bit of she's had a lot of field experience before, but she's a powerhouse. So back to us all. We have slow days where people get a little silly waiting for something to happen. There's a lot of sit around and wait in migration, because that's, you know, all of us who bird know you have a lot of those days where nothing much is going on, and we try to be open every single day, because that's data too, and you never know what's going to happen. But this is life at the banding tent. This is probably like last week of August this year, and that's Callie in the middle with that nice hat. And then you have a day like today. Today, this was probably Liz Golden. They caught 77 birds, although actually she probably didn't have that many bags hanging up. This is me on probably 170 bird day, so I'm banding as fast as I can. So, and that's also just, we live for those days. The adrenaline gets going, and when you have one of these smooth days at the end, you're like, wow, look at all these birds we banded. And we saw a lot of neat birds in the process. It's very, very satisfying for all parties. So one of the things that happens, it's all in good fun, but we people basically volunteer on set days. It's the easiest way to schedule, and they just pick a day based on around their work and their life commitments. So you get like the Monday crew, the Tuesday crew, the weekend crew, and we all tease each other by catching something really good or having a good day. We go neener, neener, neener to pretty much all of the other people at the banding station. Look what we got today. And Liz, who's very clever and creative in that kind of way, she actually made a trophy for us once where she made little tiny bird bags hanging on the clothesline like we do in real life as our official meter trophy. So whoever caught the best bird on their day at the end of the season gets to be gets the Neener trophy. And I'm holding a mega Neener. We will hear about that bird at the end. So now for some of the birds that we've shared over the years. I'm going to focus on kind of the more unusual birds for this one. Because I mean, we all love all the birds we catch, but you do get kind of like, oh, wow, that's weird. What are the odds that that bird ended up here in our nets? And 2005 was a good year for that. I saw a sulfur-bellied flycatcher flying around the site, and then pow, it was in a net. And that was just an amazing bird to hold in the hand. It's unlike anything really. I mean, it's maybe close to a kingbird. We don't catch that many of them, but I don't know, it was my first mega vagrant that we banded there, and it was pretty exciting. Followed by the Townsend's warbler and a thick-billed vireo in the same week in 2005. So we had 3 amazing birds in the same field season, and I had a pretty new permit, and the guy at the banding lab was like, really? Pictures, please. And I'm like, no, really, no, really. And so I sent him pictures. He's like, all right, you are catching what you say you're catching. It's kind of a lot of weird birds for one season. And this thick-billed vireo was probably one of the first banded in the continental US. I'm not sure who else would have banded one. I'm sure obviously in the islands people banded them, but not on the continent. And that was November 7th, 2005. Then we wait 12 years and they're all over the place. We caught one in 2017. That was number 2. In 2018, we caught this juvenile bird. He's so young. He's barely out of juvenile plumage. And I think that was that year. That time, there was just more and more thick-bills just showing up around. And I think we had multiple in Bill Baggs, Cape Florida. Brian probably remembers exactly when it was, what season it was. But there's time in there where there were so many around that it was like, I wouldn't be surprised if they're breeding, or they sometimes bred at Bill Baggs. I'm pretty sure they're breeding in the Keys, because it seems like every year people are seeing juvenile thick-bills. But this is a fairly recent development. It was 12 years between that first one and now. We've actually caught 3 now, just in 3 and 4 years. And then this little fuzzy guy on the right is the banana quit, the one banana quit we've caught who is in juvenile plumage, who somebody, I can't remember who anymore, brought him back from the net and said, my favorite thing is when somebody has a bag and they're like, I don't know what this is. My absolute favorite thing, if it's Robin Diaz holding a bag going, I don't know what this is, because then you know you got a mega. But this was, I remember peeking in that bag and I saw the brown and I saw the little hanky on the wings, and I was like, why isn't this a black-toed blue female? And then I pull it out and it's got this crazy curved beak and these huge feet. And I was just like, whoa, because it's a banana quit. And this is a bird that's super abundant all over the islands, Central America, I think into South America. It has a huge range. There's a bunch of different races. I went to Puerto Rico once. It's like you needed a mask to keep from breathing them in. But they're not established in Florida, and I don't think they're established in Cuba either, which to me is one of the great mysteries of ornithology. They show up Florida nowadays. They're pretty much annual somewhere in Florida, especially down here, but they haven't really, given how versatile they are, I don't know what keeps them from establishing themselves here. And then here's just some beautiful classic North American birds. That cerulean warbler Yeah, we catch golden wings. We caught maybe 8. We catch them like every few years. We catch one. The last one we caught was a female that was probably a Brewster's warbler. She was mixed with black, excuse me, blue wing warbler. But here's a crisp male, solid 100% golden wing, as far as we can tell. And then this cerulean warbler is in. There's a photographic guide to warblers that I don't hold mine's at the banding station. That actually this picture is used to illustrate the male cerulean. And this guy was from 2010, and I just bought my house, and it was a 5-bird day with 4 of them caught in the first couple net runs, and me and Liz, I think Robin was, me, Liz, and Robin were there, and we hadn't caught anything for 3 hours, and it was noon, and I'm like, I'm gonna go home, paint my new house. We haven't caught anything, and Liz didn't want to go to office, so they stayed open an hour after I left. And then I got the phone, I got the Neener on my phone. I was in the parking lot down in Homestead, Campbell, and US 1. And I look at my phone and I see that picture. It's like closing run, look what we got. Full adult male cerulean, just incredible plumage. We haven't caught a cerulean since 2018. We usually catch hatching year. This is the only adult we've ever caught. I think we've caught maybe 8 or 9 of them so far, and all of them have been young, mostly females, sometimes males, but this full adult male is spectacular. So I'm glad Robin got good pictures of him. And some more cuties. Ash-showed flycatcher that we got in 2014 is surprisingly the only other Marcus we've caught in fall, other than we usually catch great cresteds every year because they're all over. We've never caught a brown crested out there. We did catch one spring, a Las Sagras, but I don't have a good picture of that one. And we tried really hard to catch the Las Sagras last spring. There was one hanging out by our banding station. We now have 2 canopy nets to try to catch the birds that go over our nets, but he was very close to them and kind of dancing around our high net one day this spring. But this ash-showed just kind of appeared out of nowhere. They turn up at Lucky Hammock down in that weird vortex of birding where things that should be in the southwest like to end up. And then this other bird, the grasshopper sparrow, is a little brown job, except for when you see one in the hand. I think they're exquisite. I painted one of these once, and just the detail, the different colors and the touches of yellow. It's just one of those birds that's kind of underrated. I think they're quite amazing. And we have a bobolink. We've caught one. They're usually way over our nets, or they're in really open areas where they they're like at Cape Florida, they're often on the mound out on the grass. So we net in the woods. We have a couple of nets that are on the edge that sometimes catch weird birds, like we've caught a barn swallow and kingbirds there. But we caught this bobolink. I don't know if a hawk was chasing it or what, but it was a surprise. They fly over by the thousands every fall. We heard some yesterday and today. And Robin Diaz said, this is probably why Robin moved away from Florida, because one day she said, I want to catch a bobolink. If we catch a bobolink, then my work here is done. I've seen everything I want to see. So then we caught this bobolink. So that's probably why she moved. But it was a neat bird to look at up close. Really, really long wings. They migrate all the way down to Argentina. And then this bird on the other side, this is a probable Cassin's vireo. We caught this bird in September. We don't get blue-headeds until November. Most years we don't even catch blue-headed before we close. And this bird was very green. It didn't have that sharp bluish head. And I submitted it. I called it a solitary vireo to the banding lab, because I'm not lying, because solitary vireo was broken out into 3 species: blue-headed in the east, plumeus and mountain west, and Cassin's along the Pacific. And I submitted it to the records committee. They didn't accept it because I think it would be the first Florida record, and they're very, very cautious about the first one. And the measurements unfortunately overlap. And the reason I think it's a Cassens is I got on the listserv. There's a listserv with all the serious birders around the country that go on, like Peter Pyle's on there, the guy that wrote our banding book. There's all kind of Javier, I don't mess up his name. A lot of the biggest names in birding are on there, in science also, ornithology. And I said, is this, all the Western people were like, yeah, if I saw that out west, I wouldn't bat an eye. It looks like a Cassens vireo. So either the most green blue-headed vireo in the history of the East Coast showed up 2 months early, month and a half early, or it was a Cassens vireo. So I kind of think that's what it was, but we'll never know for sure. Oh, oops, skipping ahead. Here's another fun bird that annoyed maybe some people in our county that shall remain nameless, but their initials are B's. This is there was a task walk on September 27th, 2015 it was, and usually they go there. I think we have one coming up in a couple of weeks, but they'll take a walk around the park, and then I'll be in touch with whoever the leader is, and when they come by the banding station, we'll save some birds to show them birds. The walks are usually too many people for them to all come into the banding station, so we bring the birds out to them, and they just happen to be going by, and we caught this I think it was Nico Porcelli was like, I got this weird bird here, I think it's a mourning warbler, and we look at it and measure it, and it's like, I don't know if that's a mourning, I think it's a McGillivrays. And we had some back and forth and concluded that it was a hybrid, to the best that we can conclude these things, because it had the measurements were inconclusive, and one of the measurements you use to define it, they have different tail lengths, and I think you'd like subtract the tail length from the wing, and if it's this number, it's a mourning. If it's this other number above or below this number, it's a McGillivrays, and ours was right on the border. And a mournings, we've had several mournings over the years. The females usually have, or the young birds usually have yellow throats. And there is something about the length of the tail was more McGillivrays. But I looked at all kinds of pictures. I also sent this bird on that listserv where a lot of Western people were looking and debated it. And the eye ring is more than a mourning usually has. Sometimes young mournings have eye rings, but it wasn't nearly as extensive as a McGillivrays, which has like a double crescent that's really obvious. So we just called it a hybrid, and that's what I submitted it to the bird banding lab. So anybody in that walk that wanted to see a mourning only got to see part of a mourning. And the funny thing is most of the local birders around here have seen McGillivrays because they're fairly common vagrant. There's often one hanging out every few years. One will hang out in the park for everybody to go see it. So that was a fun bird. And now we get to some eyeball candy. This bird, I was not there for this bird. I was in school sitting in class when I got neutered pretty hard by Miriam and Mario and that bunch, because I caught this young male Key West quail dove who's just exquisite with his just the iridescence is coming in. You can see he's got young feathers, and feathers are brown with the white tip, or they're the juvenile feathers, but this beautiful magenta iridescence is coming in, and the green on his head. And that's another vagrant that seems like there's more around than you realize. They lurk, so they just kind of turn up here and there. But we've caught one, and we were very happy. But this is the bird, our mega neener. This is a Ruddy Quail Dove. She's not as spectacularly colored as a Key West Quail Dove, but she's way more rare. This It's definitely the first one ever banded in the mainland US, and it's probably only about the 5th record for the whole country. And just one day out of nowhere, it wasn't even a busy day. It was just, I think Liz Golden brought her back. And I come back from a net run, and Liz got the Caribbean bird book out. I was like looking, like, what the heck is this? And it was a Ruddy Quail Dove. They're very common in the islands and Central America. I think they're also common there too. She actually ended up hanging around at the banding station we banded her in September, and we would every now and again see her in the area, but she was very shy. And when we left in November, as far as we knew, she was still out there. We had to sit on this one because she was in the middle of the banding area and stayed there. And if we'd made this public to birders, we would have been invaded, and it would have ended our field season. So we wouldn't have been able to collect any data with birders traipsing everywhere to look for her. And when we closed, I don't know if anybody went to look for her or not. We never saw her again after that fall. And this was also a young bird. But that's pretty much our top, our favorite. And
thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much for your dedication and passion to this project for so many years. I'm going to give everybody, all our participants, an opportunity to put any questions or thoughts you have into the Q&A. And while you're doing that, and Brian will take a look at those questions and field them, I'm going to introduce our Tropical Audubon Society's president, Joe Barros. We have him on the webinar today, and he's going to talk a little bit about the Cape Florida Banding Station fundraiser and his thoughts. And then as soon as he's done, we'll field some questions. So please stick with us. Thanks. Joe? You need to unmute. Okay. There you go. Nope. Okay, we'll get you. We'll get you. You just have to unmute.
There we go.
Okay.
I needed your
Approval.
Yes.
You got it.
Well, thank you all, and sorry to have joined in late, but I did get a chance to see some old friends early on, and of course all the birds that I've missed, all the special birds. But I can't tell you how wonderful it is to volunteer at the banding station. It really is quite an experience to be able to hold some of these really wonderful, beautiful warblers that we see flying from tree to tree. And now you have one in hand, and the beauty of the feathers and the personality that these birds have is really something you do kind of catch in the field. But boy, when you're got that one in hand, and some are very feisty and some want to try to fight you, and other ones just kind of mellow out. It's really an unbelievable experience, and I'm so lucky that I was able to do that in the past year, and hope that I will make some more time to do it again soon. I encourage everyone to contact Michelle to volunteer in the future as soon as you can. I want to thank Michelle for that 20-year history of the banding station. I can't tell you how proud I've always been of the banding station, even when they were independent of Tropical Audubon Society. It was always just citizen science in our own backyard here in Miami-Dade County, and just going on for so many years. And I'm even extra proud that we are able to be part of this success now with the bird banding station and Tropical Audubon Society working together. I do want to also take this time and want you all to take this opportunity to participate in supporting the bird banding station with our Adopt a Net program. And it has that slide up where you can donate and receive credit for half a net, a full net, or as she says, the all-in, half a net for $75, full net for $150, all in for $1,000. 100% of your donation will go to the Cape Florida Banding Station. This is a program we want to keep running in South Florida and keep this wonderful data set that Michelle has collected over all these years going, and make it available to the science community, which Michelle has just done a great job with this over the last 20 years. Also, as you are a supporter, you will be getting a report every year with the species that and the number of birds caught in the season. And also, as a supporter, you can you can use the net to honor a loved one or in memoriam of a friend or loved one. There's some of the examples there. Our good friend Paul Bithorn, who I was so happy to see that card out there when I first started volunteering out there. And sure enough, one of the first birds I was able to handle was a hooded warbler, and I just had it in the Paul Bithorn net. So how touching that was for me. Jim King, also someone who, as Michelle mentioned, was such a great naturalist and a great supporter of the bird banding station. So there was a link there. There's also a link on our website, as Anna has it right there, Cape Florida Banding Station Adopt a Net fundraiser. You can go to tropicalaudubon.org and go to support the banding station, and that will allow you to link in and donate to our Adopt a Net, which again goes to supporting the banding station, replacing nets and other needs that we may have. And let me tell you, Michelle runs this program. She's been running it on a shoestring budget, and there's just so much that she has done to be able to run this program with so little. And we really need to be able to take care of some of the things that she needs to support the program. So with that, I encourage everyone to take part. I think Brian, I think, was going to be taking some questions here soon. So I encourage you all to, again, go to the website, and in the chat, please ask your questions so that Michelle can answer them. It's just the beginning of learning more about the bird banding station. So I'll let Brian take over.
All right, thanks, Joe. And thanks to Michelle for sharing 20 years of amazing history of the Cape Florida Banding Station. We did get a few more questions. If anyone else would like to put their questions in the Q&A, we should have time to get to a few questions. I'm going to ask a question first because yesterday, Joe and I attended Tropical Audubon Conservation Committee meeting, and the chairperson of that committee had a question, and I told him that he would need to wait until tonight in order to get the answer to the question. So hopefully he's listening. And so the question that he had was, where does the data that's collected from the banding station go? And why is that data important to collect? So Michelle, if you could start with that question.
Okay, well, the data goes directly back to the bird banding lab and is aggregated with all the other banding data. So people can either directly access it from there, or they can talk to me directly about, I've done data sharing with somebody, like most recently, somebody was doing a study of blackpolls all across North America. And so they were getting data from different banding stations. But I think the most important thing, banding data like what I'm collecting, is mostly used. it can be used. I'm collecting kind of baseline data, monitoring data. When we have people that work with us, they often collect more specific data on specific species of birds that they might be doing a PhD, asking a specific question. This is kind of generalized data, but because it's using the same protocols, it can be compared with other banding data. And it also lets us know how well the Billbags Cape Florida habitat is for birds that need to stop there. And we've proven, I think we have mounds of information, 40,000 birds worth of information that restored habitat that Liz Golden and others put together by hand after Andrew is actually serving its function as a really good high quality stopover for birds. It's also good wintering for a lot of birds like ovenbirds. But the thing about the banding station that's special is that it is a 20-year data set. There's not a lot of data sets that long anywhere in the country because it's hard to keep this kind of a monitoring station like this going year after year after year. And so I'm hoping that the data will be useful for people that want to ask questions about climate change. Has it been changing anything about bird migration down here? They're starting to do a lot of work on that up in the Northeast, where there are some long-running banding stations with like 50-year data sets. But you can start to see something in 20 years. You know, I mean, I can see differences between the 2000s and now, and I don't know how much the habitat's changed a lot as the forest has grown versus there's wider. There's a lot of questions we could ask. That's one of the things that we want to do as part of collaborating, as part of being, allowing us to keep going and expand, is trying to get more outreach to try to find scientists that want to ask the questions that we can collaborate with to get this data used more widely.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Hopefully that answered our committee chair's question to his satisfaction. Let's get to some questions from some of tonight's listeners. Scott is asking, how often do you catch a bird that you've banded before?
Well, sometimes we catch birds. We only take data, like if we catch a bird we've already banded, if it's the next day or anytime after, we'll weigh it again because we want to see. That's actually really important data. We call it recapture data. And that lets us know we banded this bird this week and he was skinny. She didn't have any fat, and the other birds were fat and they left on a good night for migration, but this bird's still here. We catch her a week later. How much fat has she put on? So I have this aggregated data for different species, and that's actually really important information. And then the other time we catch birds is we catch birds that come back a year later, 10 years later. You start to get longevity data from them. And it's also kind of cool to see ovenbirds that spend 8-9 years. They come back to Cape Florida every year for the winter. And then the other time we catch birds is other people catch our birds or we catch other people's birds. So our birds have been caught by, I like when they're caught by other banders because they're still alive, and sometimes, they hit a building or something and we get the data that way. Somebody notices the band, they report it to the bird banding lab. But we have our birds have turned up all the way from, I think, Newfoundland, all the way down to Puerto Rico. And then we've caught birds that other banders have. Like we've caught birds banded by most of the, several of the really big, old, established northeastern banding stations. Like I think we've caught a bird from Powder Mill, caught a bird from Braddock Bay. So it's kind of cool to exchange. So yeah, the recapture data and the return data is very important.
Okay.
Answer the question.
Yeah, I think so. Francis is asking a question about extracting the birds from the nets. And I'm going to reword the question. How do you train your extractors to make sure that the birds are extracted from the nets without being injured, extracted from them safely?
Very carefully. When somebody shows up who's brand new, they spend days just learning how to hold birds. And after that, they graduate to watching one of us that's experienced take them out and we're explaining what we're doing. And then they start doing, we call them wraps, how they're in the net. So they go around with an experienced person for quite a long time until they feel, we both watch them and kind of assess their skills, and when they also feel confident on their own, because nobody wants to hurt a bird. So everybody, but we take a while to train somebody. It can take a whole season. That's why we're really serious about having people make a 1 day a month, 1 day a week at least commitment, because that's how long it takes to train people to properly hold the birds. But the better they get, because the birds get, they have different ways that they get caught in the net. So you have like the easy, we call them wraps. It's like, oh yeah, it's in, it comes right out. But the biggest thing is teaching them how to safely hold birds even when they're not in the net.
All right, thanks. We have a question from one of Tropical Audubon's field trip leaders, Bill Boringer. He asked, it's not a question about mourning warblers. He's asking, do you ID birds as to subspecies? He's just thinking of the grasshopper sparrow, whether it was the Florida race or the northern subspecies.
We might if we could, but in the case of that sparrow, I think the people that work with grasshopper sparrows can hardly tell them apart just by looking at them. They're like, when the grasshoppers, wintering ones are here, they're, it's like, how do you tell the Florida? It's the ones that are still here in June that you banned it already. But given that, because we've also caught a couple of seaside sparrows in the woods like that, which is weird, but I'm pretty sure, without being 100%, that is the migratory northern race. I mean, the race that comes down here for the winter, for the simple reason that sedentary birds, because I didn't talk about that little drama. The first time we caught a seaside sparrow, there was drama about whether it was a Cape Sable seaside sparrow flying all the way out to Cape Florida or the migratory race, and the timing of it was exactly middle of September when we get these overshoots of the migratory seaside sparrows going back and forth between New Jersey and like North Florida, and they always show up middle of September. Somebody sees one down here, and so migrant birds, because they're up, they fly at night and they fly thousands of feet in the air. They're going to make migration. They're going to make mistakes or get carried somewhere weird by winds, or the sun's going to come up and they're looking for a place to land, and they're like, oh, here's this island, let me land here, and I'm in the middle of a hammock. Versus a sedentary bird is not going to up and go all the way from Haynes Prairie to or the Florida Everglades out to, there's nothing really to make it go there. So the odds are probably 99.9% that that's a regular grasshopper sparrow.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. That the Florida subspecies, it's very unlikely that they would migrate away from where they spend their entire lives. All right, I think we'll do one more question because it's closing in on 7 o'clock now. April Waters, who has been attending many of our field trips in the last year or two. She's a relatively new birder. She's asking a question about that Ruddy Quail Dove. She wants to know if that Ruddy Quail Dove is an endangered species.
It's not. It's widespread in the tropics. I don't know off the top of my head what its status is, like international. It's probably a bird of least concern, but I'd have to Google it. They're very common. I've seen them in, I can't remember where I saw one in Dominican Republic or where. I'd have to look at my notes just on a trail. But it's a pretty common island bird. It's just they're very rare in the US because we're out of their range.
Right. I think a lot of new birders, they often get confused by what it means to be a rare bird.
Mm-hmm.
So a rare bird is not necessarily a bird that is rare everywhere. It could be
just rare here.
Exactly. It could be very common in its native range, but when it shows up somewhere as a vagrant, like this Ruddy Quail Dove did on Cape Florida, then it's considered rare.
And
And
vagrants are fun because partly because you're seeing something new, but it's kind of, you know, it's interesting to see a bird so out of range. Like I remember seeing a pine warbler on a cactus out in Big Bend once. It's like, okay, that's weird. But it's kind of fun time. What are the odds that this bird is roaming and it just happens to intersect with me, either to see it or to have it in our net? It's just, what are the odds of that happening? It's just
absolutely.
kind of a trip.
All right, there are a few comments that people have made that you can take a look at those later. But Anna, should we wrap this up now?
Yes, unless anyone else wants to put a question in, thank you. Thank everyone so much for joining us tonight. I did want to point out one thing before we go. If you didn't mention it already, Michelle, this is the 20th anniversary of the Cape Florida Banding Station, and we have a limited edition logo, which Michelle created herself, which you see right here on the screen. Most of you could probably guess this. This is an ovenbird. And anybody who adopts a net this year will get a limited edition embroidered patch with this logo, and we will also have stickers. So I encourage you to do that. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. Thank you.
Let me say
Michelle.
one last thing that I forgot to say before.
Absolutely.
It was not an exhaustive list of every single volunteer. I've had a lot more people. It kind of was heavy on the years and the seasons we just had good pictures for. So if you're out there and you're a volunteer and you didn't see yourself, please don't take it personally. You're still amazing.
We're very grateful to all the volunteers that really make this work. And if somebody does want to volunteer, please get in touch with Michelle at Cape Florida Banding at tropicalaudubon.org. Joe?
And let me just say that the field trip that Michelle was talking about, I believe is October 1st to Bill Bagg's park, of which she'll be leading, I believe. I'm sure Brian will probably be on the trip. And if you haven't realized it already, the amount of knowledge between these two people is really amazing. So come out to our bird walk, come out to all our bird walks, and you will also be able to chat with these people and talk about the birds and your questions and learn so much from them. So I look forward to that bird walk and seeing everyone out there.
Thank you, Joe. And if anybody wants to go on any of our bird walks, particularly that one, you can go to our website and register for the field trips right there and get all the information you need. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
All right.